Hi, everybody. Welcome to the next chapter. We're talking about social psychology right now. So we had personality and social influence. We're going to continue a little bit with that social psych side of things and continue talking about social psychology today. But to start, I want to go ahead and start with this idea because we're going to start with ideas of persuasion and compliance a little bit here before we get into some of the other stuff. And we'll get into balance theory in just a minute. But I want you to answer this question. Let's say that there's somebody you really dislike and they say that they hate a new movie. So, all right, so this is like you talking to Adolf Hitler, and Adolf Hitler says, "Oh, I hate that new Disney movie." What would be balanced for you to do? Okay, so if Adolf Hitler says, "Oh, I hate that new Disney movie," then it makes sense that you would want to like that movie because you don't want to be associated with Adolf Hitler, right? We're going to talk about how balance theory works and how people persuade each other in just a little bit. But first, let's go ahead and talk about something that kind of was brought up in the last chapter, but we didn't talk about too much, and that is specifically Phil Zimbardo's Stanford prison study. So these are photos from the Stanford prison study, and this has become a little more famous after the movie was created. But this has to do with the ideas of people falling into specific roles. So remember that the idea of social psychology, which is what we're talking about in this chapter, social psychology is about how the environment, not the personality, but the environment really has an undue effect or more of an effect on people's behavior than we would normally think. Okay? So if you think about this, all the people you see here are Stanford undergraduate students and they have been randomly assigned to either be a prisoner or a guard. And the idea of the Zimbardo prison study is that people were randomly assigned to be a prisoner or a guard, and they immediately went into those roles as soon as they were called, assigned to be a guard. They began to act in an authoritarian way, and all of the prisoners also felt like they were actual prisoners. They finally had to discontinue the study early because people were falling way too quickly into those roles. Now, is that because of their personality traits or is it because of the environment they were put in? In this case, it's hard to say it's your personality trait. Of course, it has something to do with your personality traits, but it's hard to say it's all your personality traits because they were randomly assigned to be one or the other. Instead, when they were given different cues in their social environment, like their clothes, for example, or the role in the social environment, they really fit into it in an extreme way, not necessarily because they're sadistic people, but instead because of the roles that they were given. So, what we're saying in social psychology is that social psychology says that the environment has more of an effect than we think it does. By environment, I mean the social environment has more of an effect than we think it would. Now, this again became important later on when we had the actual thing happen in real life. So, for example, the prisoner abuse at Abu Ghraib. Abu Ghraib was a prison in Iraq, and ironically, the prison in Iraq was used for a lot of political prisoners by Saddam Hussein, and then we, meaning Americans, took over in Iraq, used that same prison for our political prisoners, and ended up abusing them in inhumane ways. So these are American soldiers that you see abusing Iraqi detainees in this particular case. Why? Well, it turns out that people fit into a social role when they're put in a specific environment. I want to change gears here and move away from what we're talking about right now and move into something called compliance techniques. Now, compliance normally, often we think about this idea of, oh, you have to comply because I am, the authority figure and I can be mean to you. But no, normally when we're talking about compliance techniques, we're actually talking about persuasion. We're not talking about somebody forcefully making you comply, but instead asking you to comply to a request. In fact, normally we're talking about sales in this particular case. So when we talk about compliance techniques, we're not talking about being a prisoner and being tortured. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about being persuaded to do something like an advertisement. So let's start with an idea of reciprocity. Reciprocity is a very powerful compliance technique. If you want to sell something, and if you're a normal person, you probably will have to sell something sometime, then these are the kinds of compliance techniques that salespeople are taught in order to help you to make you want to buy their stuff. or to give money or whatever it happens to be. So when we talk about reciprocity, we're talking about the idea of I do something for you, so you do something for me. It's not a bribe, though. I'm not saying, hey, if I give you $10, will you buy this car? No, that's not how it's going. We're saying, hey, I'm going to do something nice for you. Now, would you do something nice for me? Not, it's not contingent on, my niceness is not contingent on your niceness. It's not a bribe. We as humans have a really strong norm of reciprocity. Have you ever noticed this? You might have gotten a gift from somebody you didn't expect to get a gift from, and you don't like it because, oh, now I feel like I have to give you a gift. That's the norm of reciprocity. When somebody does something nice for us, we feel like we should do something nice for them. And well, this can work really well as a compliance technique. So there's a famous study in 1971 where we have students who are part of a study, right? Just like a normal study. And so the actual participant comes to the study, says, hey, I'm here for the study. They say, oh, well, hang out for just a little bit. Go and sit there on the bench outside in the hall while we get things ready. Then another participant comes, but that participant is actually a Confederate. They're in on the study, okay? So this person comes and they say, okay, wait in the hall. The person waits in the hall, and then the Confederate goes over to the soda machine. And here's where the independent variable happens. Either the Confederate buys a soda just for herself, or the Confederate buys a soda for herself and for the actual participant who's waiting. Comes by and says, hey, thought you might like a soda. Got it? Okay. Then they go through the study. And at the end of the study, the Confederate says, oh, hey, that was a really interesting study. It was all fake, by the way. There's nothing really going on in that study. By the way, I'm in a sorority. Would you be willing to buy a raffle ticket for our sorority? Now, the raffle ticket is a lot more expensive than a soda is. It's like $10. I don't know what it is, but it's more expensive than the cost of the soda. And what they found was that if the participant was given a soda by the Confederate, then the participant was much more likely to buy a raffle ticket from the Confederate later on. This is reciprocity. You did something nice for me, you gave me a soda. I'm going to do something nice for you. I'm going to buy the raffle ticket, even though the raffle ticket is much more expensive. It's not a, hey, if I give you this soda, will you buy a raffle ticket? That's what's going on. Instead, I do something nice for you, you do something nice for me. Have you ever seen somebody receive these address labels in the mail from a charity, for example? Well, what they find is that if you give a gift, like address labels, to somebody, then they're much more likely to donate to your charity. These cost like 5 cents to print, and then people are going to give, a dollar, probably a lot more than a dollar to do that. That's why they do that, is because they give you something, and then you are much more likely to give something in return. It's a norm of reciprocity. The compliance is that what you're asking for. So, for example, in the study, the participant complied when they're willing to buy a raffle ticket. They complied to the raffle ticket request. Okay, let's do another one. The door in the face technique. By the way, Cialdini is a very famous scientist who did a lot of these compliance techniques. So if you're looking for a book, Cialdini's book is probably the most famous on these. Excuse me. So door in the face. Sometimes it is helpful if we actually get a no. Okay, so imagine that you're a door-to-door salesperson, right? So you're going and you're knocking on people's doors and you're saying, hey, come buy this vacuum cleaner from me, all right? The door in the face means sometimes it's good to have the door slammed in your face. Meaning, here's what happens. You go in and you ask for a very large request, not the thing that you actually want, and then scale it back. So door in the face is you ask for a lot, you settle for less, which means, let's say that I want you to buy a vacuum cleaner. So I go in and I say, hey, would you be willing to buy a year-long service of cleaning that costs $100 a week to come and clean your house? And then that's pretty big, so you say no. You slam the door. You slam the door in my face, that big request. And then I go back and I say, oh, okay, all right. Well, if you're not willing to do that, would you be willing to buy this vacuum cleaner here for only $150 for the first, just one-time payment of $150? you're much more likely to say yes to that second, lesser request, even though that's the request that I actually wanted. So the famous study that was done by Cialdini and his colleagues was on a college campus. So they went around and said, all right, they had a bunch of participants. They're going around just randomly on the campus, walking up to people, and they went up and said, hey, we're a part of this club. And in this club, we help at-risk youth in the community. And so we want to know if you'd be willing to volunteer for 5 hours a week for an entire year. And of course, most people are saying no to that request. Then they follow up and say, oh, well, then would you be willing to just one time chaperone our outing at the zoo this weekend, this Saturday? Would you come and be a chaperone? If they did it that way, where they asked for the big request, come and donate your time, every week for a year, people were much more likely to say yes to the second request, which is, would you be willing to be a chaperone this weekend? They had another condition where they just went up to people and said, hey, would you be willing to be a chaperone this weekend? They didn't do the, hey, would you be willing to volunteer, a bunch first. When they did that, they found that people were less likely. They had to have, when they had the big request first, followed up by the secondary request, people were much more likely to comply. Why does this work? Well, sometimes we think it's because of perceptual contrast. If you remember when we were talking about perceptual illusion, perception sensation, we talked about ideas of how things here are different depending on what's going on. So for example, this black dot is exactly the same size, but the smaller dots make this one look bigger, and the bigger dots make this one look smaller, even though these black dots in the middle are exactly the same size. Well, the same thing can happen in concepts as well. It seems a lot less for me to volunteer my time one time this weekend if you're comparing it to, hey, I got to volunteer 5 hours a week every week for a year. So door in the face creates an idea of perceptual contrast. Also, Cialdini believes that this is a form of reciprocity. That if the requester, say, all right, well, you don't have to do that big thing. Instead, will you do this? Me cutting back on my request is actually a gift to you, and you feel a need to reciprocate and do something nice for me. Compliance techniques, let's do some more. Foot in the door. So foot in the door is almost the opposite of the door in the face. In the foot in the door, I ask you for something small that you're almost certainly to say yes to, and then I ask you for what I want. So for example, this is the study that's done on this one was a study about people signing a petition and then being asked to actually donate money. So imagine you're walking across campus and somebody stops you and says, hey, would you be willing to sign this petition to improve the environment, right? And most people say, yeah, I want the environment to be improved, and so they sign the petition. Then they follow up and say, okay, great, now would you be willing to donate some money to help save the environment? If they had you sign the petition first, that's a small request. It's very easy for you to say yes to that. And then they follow up and say, now would you donate money? You're much more likely to donate money. Then the opposite condition, which is where they went up and they just asked people, would you be willing to donate money? They did not ask for any signature. If you do that, then you're a lot less likely. The foot in the door is you ask for the small request, like a signature, something they're almost certain to say yes to, and then you ask for what you want. Humans love to be consistent. They want to be seen as consistent. In fact, many salespeople have the motto of, get people to say yes, get them saying yes. So they'll ask you a lot of questions and they want you to say yes to those. And as you're saying yes, 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 they say, hey, would you buy this? You are likely to want to be cognitively consistent and want to say yes to the next request, even though that would be the same as them asking, hey, do you want to buy this normally? Okay, the foot in the door is get them saying yes to a small request so that they're more likely to say yes to a bigger request. The last one we want to talk about is scarcity. So when things are scarce, they have cognitive value, right? They have perceived value. If things are in a limited number, they seem more valuable to people. Now, why is this? When we create deadlines, it creates that idea of a limited number or scarcity. When things are more scarce, they seem more valuable. So, for example, toilet paper in COVID-19 crisis, right? Suddenly it feels scarce and becomes extremely valuable. This happens on a regular basis, though. For example, De Beers is a diamond corporation. What happens is they actually limit the amount of diamonds that are available in the marketplace. Diamonds are not the rarest of gems, right? In fact, they're compared to other rare gems, they're relatively common. But because we've created an idea of scarcity, they've increased their value. So another example is a Birkin bag. So if I don't know if any of you have heard of this, but go Google a Birkin bag. A Birkin is a handbag um, that costs tens of thousands of dollars. Now it's not made out of pure gold. It's not made out of a dinosaur skin or something like that. It's made out of normal materials, but because they are made scarce, right? In fact, they actively limit. People want a Birkin bag and they say no, you can't have it. You have to be on a waiting list, and it creates that scarcity, and they can sell it for tens of thousands of dollars because it's scarce. Whenever you see a deadline, people are creating scarcity. I don't know if you've ever seen a commercial that says, oh, only for the next 15 minutes. If you call, they're going to give you that deal if you called in 2 weeks. That's not real. But they're trying to create a form of scarcity, right? Oh, I've got a limited time. I can't do this. In fact, if you knew this, most sales that you see at a store or online are very contrived. It's not like they have, oh no, I ordered too much inventory and now I got to get rid of it. That's not what's happening. Instead, what they're really doing is they're saying, all right, we're going to normally mark up all these prices, and then we're going to sell it during the sale for what we actually want it to be sold for. And they create that scarcity that way. Reactance is a psychological phenomenon. This is very similar to what we talked about with reactant formation. Uh, Reaction formation earlier on when we talked about Freud and defense mechanisms. But reactance is when you feel like your control has been taken away. So often people call this reverse psychology. If I feel like my control is being taken away, I want to do the opposite thing that I'm being told not to do. So for example, when I tell my kids, hey, don't climb up on the table, they might not have been thinking on climbing on the table, but they immediately want to climb up on the table. Humans, when they have their control being taken away from them, they want to exercise that control. So when we create a deadline, we're saying, oh, you can't do this after this point. You say, oh, yeah, I better do it right now because you're going to take away my control, my ability to do something. I'm going to do it. And it's reverse psychology. Okay, those are compliance techniques. Compliance techniques are very similar to ideas of persuasion and other forms of social influencing that have happened. So let's talk a little bit about balance theory. Balance theory is a basic idea by Fritz Heider in 1958 is when he came up with balance theory. It's the idea that we want our cognitions to be balanced. I want my beliefs about things to be balanced. So remember when we talked about, hey, if Freud hates a movie, you should like it? Freud. Whoops, sorry, Freud. If Hitler likes a movie, sorry, let's say that one more time. If Hitler hates a movie, then you should like it. Well, because that's balanced. You hate Hitler, Hitler hates the movie, you love the movie, that's balanced, right? So whenever we talk about balance theory, we create this triangle. That's what it started with. So the basic idea is we create a triangle. Well, this can happen in advertisements as well. We want everything about us to be balanced. If you've ever had a best friend who is dating a jerk, then you understand imbalance. We psychologically don't like imbalance, okay? I like my friend likes the jerk, I hate the jerk. You can feel that imbalance going on in your head. Well, when we look at this in terms of advertising, let's say that this is you and you're watching the TV. Let's assume you've never heard of Apple computers before. I know that's a weird thought, but let's assume that you never have. And so you're watching TV and suddenly there's an advertisement. Well, back in the day, there used to be these advertisements where I'm a Mac and I'm a PC. Well, the Mac guy was really cool, right? And the PC guy was dumpy and lame. These pluses mean liking, right? And a negative would mean dislike. So I'm watching this commercial. I don't know anything about Macs, right? So I don't know if I like them or dislike them. That's why there's a question mark there. However, I see this dude here and he seems nice and I like him. and he likes Max. So what would be balanced? It'd be balanced for me to like the Mac, even though I really don't have any other information except that I like this dude over here. Conversely, let's assume that you don't know anything about PCs, you don't know anything about Microsoft. So you see this guy, and he's dumpy and kind of weird, and you don't like him, but he likes PCs, I'm sorry, he likes Windows. And so what's balanced? It's balanced for me to not like that, because this dumpy guy I do not like likes the PC. We want our beliefs and cognitions to be balanced with other beliefs and cognitions. So I love my wife. My wife likes mayonnaise. I hate mayonnaise. Oh, that's imbalanced. You can feel the tension. However, I love my wife. My wife loves jazz music. I love jazz music. Then everything is balanced. Okay? You can figure out balance based off of the pluses and minuses. So if you're ever looking at one of these ideas, you should just put yourself there and put somebody you like or dislike in the other corner, and then figure out what would be balanced. I like this person, they like that thing, then it's balanced for me to like it. I dislike this person, that person likes this thing, it would be balanced for me to dislike that thing. This idea of balance theory is the basis of what's called cognitive dissonance. Now, cognitive dissonance is the most famous of theories in social psychology. It is really famous. Leon Festinger, the same guy who did social comparison theory, is also the cognitive dissonance guy. So we take this idea of imbalance and then we move it into the idea of cognitive dissonance. Now, dissonance is a musical term, right? When things are not in harmony, they're dissonant. When two notes clash each other, they are dissonant. They don't sound right, okay? That's dissonance. And we have that cognitively when we have imbalance, and we want it to resolve. We want to figure out how to resolve dissonance. So imagine this. Now, I don't smoke, so let's talk about cognitive dissonance when we're discussing smoking. So let's assume that this is you, and you are a smoker. So you like smoking, but you also like health. And health and smoking, they don't get along. This is imbalance. Imbalance gives rise to, that says, negative arousal. So it gives that negative arousal, right? That feeling of, that doesn't feel right. That's the negative arousal, right? What's going on in your body when you feel like, that doesn't feel quite right. That's the negative arousal that imbalance creates. And so in order to do this, you need to create a resolution. So the dissonance happens there when we have the imbalance that leads to the arousal. That's the feeling of dissonance. And we need to resolve the dissonance that happens in our thoughts and beliefs. Okay, so there's the arousal, and then the resolution can be several different resolutions. So for example, if I stop smoking, so me, and then we change this to a negative, then that would be balanced. I hate smoking, smoking hates health, I love health, that is balanced, right? But there's other ways that we more subtly do this. It doesn't have to be directly quitting smoking. People go through a lot of different things in order to resolve their dissonance around smoking. So for example, instead of quitting smoking, maybe I'll say, oh, well, I smoke, but, I work out a lot, and that takes care of it. They're resolving their dissonance by saying, oh, well, I'm just going to give more exercise, and that's going to improve my health. And it's going to take out the effect of smoking. Or cognitively, you can go through and say, oh, well, at least, I'm not doing crack, right? So, yeah, it's not good for you, but, it's not crack, and so it's okay. People go through a lot of mental gymnastics in order to resolve the dissonance that they feel when they feel cognitive dissonance. And sometimes that is not an intuitive thing to look at. We see the biggest dissonance when somebody has a belief about themselves that's in conflict with a behavior that they've done. The biggest dissonance is when you have a belief about yourself that is in conflict with a behavior that you have done. You must resolve the dissonance somehow. And there are several ways you can, but it turns out the easiest way cognitively is often to change your belief instead of your behavior. So instead of changing the behavior of smoking, you can change your belief about things instead, and cognitively, it tends to be an easier path to resolve dissonance. Let's do Festinger and Carl Smith's $1 and $20 cognitive dissonance study. This is a very famous study about dissonance. Now, in order for you to understand this, make sure you understand the steps. So the first step that you need to understand is that everybody is brought in. Number one, you need to also understand this was done in like 1957. So $1 was worth a lot more money than it was that it is today. And $20 was a lot of cash. Okay, so a buck is a lot of money. A dollar is a good amount of money, right? You can buy more than a candy bar back in the 1950s with that. $20 is a lot of money. Okay, so anyway, here's how we go. Everybody's brought into this study, and all the participants are asked to do a very boring task. It involves like rotating spools for like 20 minutes. It is boring. It's a boring task. It is meant to be boring, and everybody does it. Everybody does that task. Then after the task, the researcher says, hey, thanks for doing that task. Hey, by the way, the person who normally explains this task to people, we can't get them. Would you be willing to explain how to do this task to the next participant? We will give you some money if you do. We'll give you either $1, so half the people are told they'll give $1, and half the people are told we'll give you $20. It's a lot of money back in the 1950s. When you talk to them, you have to say that this was a really fun task. Okay, so make sure go in there, explain how to do it, and then make sure to tell them this is a really fun task. So the participants all say yes, I'm willing to do that, either for $1 or for $20. They go in, they say, hey, this was a really fun task that we did, and the person they're talking to is actually not a real participant. It's a Confederate. The Confederate says, oh, good, I was told this was going to be boring, and so the participant has to say, no, it was really fun. Everybody lies is what happens. Okay, everybody lies about the task. The only independent variable here is how much money they were paid. The only independent variable is how much money they were paid to tell that lie, either $1 or $20. So here's how it goes. After they are paid the $1, $20, they go and lie to the person. Then the researcher says, good, go talk to my supervisor. The supervisor says, hey, how much did you enjoy the original task? That is the dependent variable. How much did you enjoy the original task, the spools? How much did you enjoy that task? Here we go. So everybody does a boring task, and everybody lies and says it's interesting. That creates the imbalance. All right? Now, think about the difference here, though. If you are paid $1 versus $20, then the arousal is going to be quite different. The people who are paid $1 have a lot of negative arousal. Oh, I just lied. I don't lie, but I just lied. And the reason why I lied was $1. That's not a good enough reason. Versus the people who had the $20, they said, well, cha-ching, yeah, I lied, but, $20. So here's how it's going. These people over here say, you know what, I'd lie to my grandma for $20. Totally worth it. Totally worth it. They are not experiencing as much negative arousal. The money is resolving the dissonance for them. But the people in the $1 condition, they're like, boy, all right, here's the clash. I don't lie, right? I'm an honest person, but I just lied. So belief about myself, I'm an honest person. Action, I lied. That's in conflict. Ah, boy, why did I do that? $1? $1 is not enough. Oh, I know. I must have really liked the task. That way, it's not an actual lie. The people who were paid $1 enjoyed the boring task significantly more than the people who were paid $20. The people who were paid $1 liked the boring task significantly more than the people who were paid $20. The reason why is because they were able to resolve the dissonance by liking the task. That way it was not as much of a lie. However, the people who were paid $20, they resolved the dissonance with the money. The money resolved the dissonance for them. The people who were paid $1 liked the task significantly more because that's the way they resolved their dissonance, by liking the task more. The people who were paid $20, they resolved their dissonance by being paid $20. Here's another. So when you're thinking about this, think about the way that you resolve dissonance in several different things. So if you see somebody who is asking for money, right? And you don't give it to them, how do you resolve the dissonance? I'm a nice person, but I didn't help somebody. How do I do it? Oh, well, there's several different ways that you resolve that dissonance. Number one, you can say, oh, well, that person's probably going to use it for a bad purpose. Or, oh, I give to lots of other charities, and so I don't have to worry about that. So that's how you're resolving your dissonance and cognitive dissonance. Over here, when people cheat on in academics, I'm an honest person, but I just cheated on this exam. How do you resolve that? Oh, well, the class was impossible. Oh, everybody cheats, that kind of stuff. That's not true, by the way. None of those things are true, but that's the way you resolve your dissonance. Let's do one last study. Effort justification, Aronson and Mills, 1958. Remember, this is 1958, okay? And this is really important. So these are all the participants are women, college students in Stanford University in 1958. So this is really important because it probably wouldn't get quite the same results if we did this test today. So in this experiment, here's what happens. People are recruited, all women in this case are recruited to be a part of a discussion section on sex. So it's a discussion group about sex. So all the women come in, they know that there's a discussion group about sex. And this is women in 1958, so it was seen as a little bit more risque to be talking about sex if you're a proper lady in the 1950s at Stanford University. So the researchers say, hey, thank you for being willing to participate in this, but to make sure that you are actually willing to have this discussion, we want you to get up in front of everybody right now with this list of words and say them out loud. And on this list of words, we have some sexual words. So what happens is half of the women are given a list of words that are very benign: kiss, hug, smooch, that kind of thing. The other half are given words that are explicit words, words that I am not willing to say, right? Explicit words. Now remember, this is women in 1958, right? When it was seen as improper for them to say those words in public. Then the women say that they either said the benign words or the nasty words. Okay. By the way, they didn't hear each other. They're doing this one by one, so they only have to say them in front of the other researchers. And they say, "Thank you very much for doing that. Now, I'm glad that you are here as part of this study. In this discussion, we want to make sure that people are talking freely, so we don't actually communicate face to face. We do it over a microphone and headphones, right? And today, we are going to have this discussion about this book right here. Have you read this book?" And of course, nobody had read the book because the book is about like the mating habits of flies or something like that. And they say, all right, well, then we're going to just unplug your microphone and just have you listen in. Then all the women listen to the same discussion. It's actually pre-recorded. They just listen to a recording of it. And on that recording, it is boring. It is like the mating habits of, I don't remember, it's either frogs or flies. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's frogs. And it's super boring. It's meant to be boring. All the women hear exactly the same discussion. So far, the only difference in their experience is whether or not they said the nasty words or the not nasty words. That's the only difference. Then everybody hears this discussion section. It's all the same. And then at the end, they say, all right, how much did you enjoy the group? Well, cognitive dissonance says this. If I am a proper lady in the 1950s, and I just said a bunch of nasty words that proper ladies don't say, then that is dissonant. Well, then how do I resolve my dissonance? It turns out that the women who said the nastiest words enjoyed the group significantly more. So everybody had to do say the nasty words, either not too nasty or very nasty. It was boring, and then, so that's the imbalance in the negative arousal and cognitive dissonance. The control words were the benign ones. The dirty words were the nasty ones. The ones who said the control words, they didn't have a lot of dissonance. They didn't have a lot of negative arousal because those are, pretty nasty. They're not nasty words. They're normal words that people say. And the group was boring. So they just said, the group was boring. I didn't like it. But over here, the women who said the dirty words, they're thinking, boy, you know what? I am a proper lady, and I just said the nastiest words that I've ever said in my life. Why did I do that? Oh, I know. I must have really liked the group. They resolved their dissonance by changing their opinion about the group. Yes, I said the nasty words, but the reason why, because I really enjoyed it. So what does this mean? Does this ever happen in college today? Well, hazing. People do a bunch of nasty things that they normally wouldn't do. Why did I do it? Oh, I must really like the group. People tend to like groups more if they go through more effort to be a part of them. Why? Because it resolves their dissonance. Why would I go through all this nasty stuff to do this thing? Oh, I know. I must really like the group. All right, thanks everybody.